Let me start with something that might sound familiar. You wake up, check your phone, answer a few emails, and get through your workday. By the time evening rolls around, you're tired, but you know you need to do something to be productive. So you do a little laundry, maybe clean up a bit, but before you know it, your day is over. Nothing terrible happened, but nothing about it really felt like living either. And when enough days start to look like that, a strange question begins to surface. Is this what living well is supposed to feel like? There's a quote I recently read from the Dalai Lama. When asked what surprised him about humanity, he replied, man, because he sacrifices his health to make money, then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. He lives as though he is never going to die and dies having never really lived. That last line really struck me because it raised the question that most of us rarely stop and ask. What does it actually mean to really live? And that's the question we're exploring. Most of us aren't living reckless lives. We're doing what we were taught to do: work hard, be responsible, build something stable. But somewhere along the line, a lot of us start noticing something. Our lives start to feel like maintenance. We maintain our job, our house, our schedule. We look up and realize that weeks are just flying by. And the moments that actually feel like life, they've become surprisingly rare. A dinner where everybody stays at the table longer than expected, or a walk outside that actually clears our head, or a conversation where, well, you lose track of time. Those moments, they stand out because they feel different from the rest of our days. They feel like real life. I think part of the challenge for most of us is that we inherited a very specific script for what living a good life is supposed to look like. You get an education, build your career, and work your way up the ladder. And none of those things are wrong, but the script tends to measure success using very specific metrics: productivity, income, and progress, which leaves a pretty big question sitting underneath all of that. And that is, does the life we're building actually feel good to live? Because it's entirely possible to build a life that looks great on paper, but quietly makes us feel disconnected from everything. And this isn't a new question. Aristotle posed the same question over 2,000 years ago. He wrote that living well didn't mean accumulating wealth or comfort. It meant living a life aligned with purpose and the development of your character. In other words, a life that felt meaningful from the inside. Modern research on well being actually echoes many of the same ideas. People who report greater life satisfaction tend to have a few things in common: strong relationships, a sense of purpose, and engagement in activities that feel meaningful. Not just busy, but meaningful. And that's a challenge for a lot of us today because modern life is really good at keeping us busy. Between the notifications, the deadlines, and the infinite streams of information, it is so easy to move from one responsibility to the next without ever stepping back and asking the question, is this actually the life that I want to be living? Not someday, but now. That life that we want to live is not going to magically appear someday. So if we keep saying later when things settle down, or later when work isn't so crazy, or later when life gets easier, that's never going to happen because later has a funny way of never actually showing up. Living well is something we practice in small ways, or we let it slowly drift away from us. So, what do we do? How do we break this cycle? Well, there's something I want you to try this week. Just one thing. I want you to notice when you actually feel like you're living, not being productive or efficient, but feeling alive. It could be during a conversation, maybe time outside, or just being fully present with somebody that you care about. Those moments, when they happen, I want you to pay attention and I want you to write them down because they're clues. There are clues about what living well might actually look like for you. If the question, what does it mean to live well, stuck with you today, I wrote a companion piece over on Substack where you can explore this idea a little bit further. I also added some reflection questions for this podcast episode. If you want to spend a little time thinking about what living well actually means in your own life, the link is in the show notes. This was part 1 of a 6-part series on what it means to actually live well, so we can stop the stress, the chaos, and get off that hamster wheel and start actually enjoying our lives. Our next episode, we're going to look at, when did society redefine what living well even looks like? Because I know for me, the version I inherited, it's not the one that I actually want.